Good morning.
Good morning, Paula. How's it going?
Whoa, you're loud. Let me adjust this a little bit.
People tell me I'm loud.
Well, no, it's the device I'm on. I had it at full volume because grandchildren are watching it.
Yes. Okay.
It's going okay.
Good. Good to see you.
It's good to be here. Is anyone else going to be here?
Miller's on.
I'm here.
Hey,
Hey,
Miller.
Miller.
Rob's coming. What's up with the screen?
I don't know. It's very blurry.
Is the screen blurry?
It's
Very.
blurry and tilted and small, like squished. Maybe.
I'm using a different computer. So
Okay.
can you see the liturgy?
No. it looks. I can tell it is the liturgy, but it is squished, and I can't see any text.
Okay. All right. Oh yeah. Okay. How do we do this?
Whoa, giant mouse. Oh, hey, it fixed.
Is that working now?
Yes.
So
That was
yeah,
weird.
it's a different computer and I'm not used to it. So
Okay.
yeah. Thank you for your patience. This may take me a bit to get used to.
Well, you look like you're in a different setting too. Have you
Yeah.
escaped for the weekend?
Yeah, I'm in Monteagle, Tennessee.
Ah.
The family came out for a camp out and we're not really camping out. We're staying in a cabin. So but my sister actually initiated it. We were going to have a extended family gathering, and then they all came down with stomach bugs. So it's just up here with my parents. But it's a beautiful place.
The walls look pretty.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I considered going outside, but I think it may be too noisy and stuff. But
Sure.
anyway,
In here too.
it may be noisy. Yes, Angela says it may be noisy in here too. So once the guys get up and start making coffee. So
Well, has Leo got back in classes yet?
yes, yeah. So he's doing school. So good start to the year. He's a sophomore this year. So
It's
blows my
amazing how
mind.
fast they grow up.
it is amazing.
I have a 45-year-old daughter, and that's impossible.
Yeah. Yeah.
My child is 4 going on 45.
That happens too, right? Yeah. I was going back looking actually because I was browsing through some photos of earlier because I was trying to find some stuff to share today. And I was, had gone back to 2011 and pictures of Leo when he was just a little guy. Anyway, pretty mind-boggling how that whole time progressing and people changing thing just never ceases to amaze.
Now that our photos end up going to the cloud and you can pull them up on the computer, Joanna's children are here with us this weekend, and Rory's favorite thing to do is to sit at that computer and start back 15, 20 years ago and look at pictures of different people growing up.
Yeah.
Oh,
it totally entertains her.
It's the new photo album. Because I remember sitting down like at family reunions and stuff and like looking at people and like when my dad had a beard like Jesus and laughing and
Yeah.
Kira looked like she became an expert at duck lips in a hurry.
Oh yeah. Yeah, she's into that.
Duck lips are hilarious, but I've never been able to stomach Pringles.
No?
No.
Oh man.
They just don't taste like potatoes. They don't taste like potatoes.
I get that.
They're an entirely different snack,
Starchy styrofoam.
We must be talking about
many starchy
Bengals.
things.
Yeah.
Pringles. Yeah, we've been watching a lot of that TV show where they call them dingle. Anyway.
Well, why don't we go and get started? I don't know if anyone else is joining us. I think we may be it. Happy Labor Day weekend to folks who are tuning in. And if you are streaming on Facebook or YouTube, just click like or leave a comment with where you're watching from. That gives us a record of your being with us today. So let's see, how do we want to divide this up? How about let's see. How about sorry, my brain is a little foggy. Can we mix it up a little bit? Paula, could you be liturgist?
Sure.
Miller, can you be voice of the people?
Sure.
And Rob, how about you take the Old Testament lesson and I'll do the New Testament reading.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So we'll confuse everyone as to the roles, and when you get mixed up, we'll not be surprised. So ready,
Okay,
ready when you all are. Yeah.
On this day in 1192, Richard the Lion-Hearted and Saladin signed the Treaty of Jaffa, ending the Third Crusade. Yesterday marked the death in 459 of Saint Simeon the Stylite, who was born in 390. Simeon was an ascetic monk who became famous for spending 37 years on top of a pillar. He began by simply standing upright for days at a time in prayer, taking Paul literally when he said pray without ceasing. Simeon first climbed a pillar in part to get away from people who would constantly interrupt his prayers to ask for advice. A community formed around him. Over time, his followers built him taller and wider pillars until his final pillar grew to 50 feet high. He would counsel people in the afternoons and sometimes preach to the crowds who gathered. He did not believe asceticism was for everyone, but instead preached moderation. People continue to perform similar feats today for various reasons, making themselves into human billboards for their causes during a hunger strike, for example, or living in trees to protect them against deforestations. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Hear these words of invitation.
The hospitality of God knows no bounds.
The love of God is immeasurable.
The generosity of God is beyond our wildest dreams.
We gather today as invited ones,
as beloved ones,
as blessed ones.
Draw near and let us break the bread of life.
The responsive reading today is from Psalm 105, verses 1 through 6 and 23 through 26. Give praise to the Lord, proclaim his name.
Make known among the nations what he has done.
Sing to him, sing praise to him, tell of all his wonderful acts.
Glory in his holy name. Let the hearts of those who seek the Lord rejoice.
Look to the Lord in his strength, seek his face always.
Remember the wonders he has done,
his miracles and the judgments he pronounced.
You, his servants, the descendants of Abraham, his chosen ones, the children of Jacob.
Israel entered Egypt. Jacob resided as a foreigner in the land of Ham.
The Lord made his people very fruitful. He made them too numerous for their foes.
Whose hearts he turned to hate his people, to conspire against his servants.
He sent Moses, his servant, and Aaron, whom he had chosen.
Our first reading comes from Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 through 15. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said, "I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. 'I am has sent me to you.'" God also said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, 'The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation."
Our gospel reading comes from Matthew chapter 16, verses 21 through 28. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, and on the third day be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. "Never, Lord," he said, "this shall never happen to you." Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their crosses and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they have done. Truly, I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." May God bless the hearing of this word. Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
Alfred Tennyson imagined the prayer of Saint Simeon the Stylite in poem. "Thou knowest I bore this better at the first, for I was strong and hell of body then. And though my teeth, which now are dropped away, would chatter with the cold, and all my beard was lagged with icy fringes in the moon, I drowned the whoopings of the owl with sound of pious hymns and psalms, and sometimes I saw an angel stand and watch me as I sang."
So we'll go to God in a time of prayer. I'll get us started. And those of you, if you're tuning in on Facebook or YouTube, or if you're on Zoom, feel free to lift up a prayer concern by putting it in the chat or the comments. I'll keep an eye on YouTube. Would someone keep an eye on Facebook for me?
I can take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, hey, I'm trying to pull it up right now too. Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button.
No worries. Let's pray together. God, as we hear the story today, we're often reminded of how small we feel. And like Moses, we ask, who am I that I should attempt whatever thing you call us to? We feel that our efforts are too small in the face of all that we face. We're often overwhelmed by the need of the world. Help us, God, to answer with faithfulness, knowing that the results do not depend on our efforts, but on you. Help us learn to put things into your hand and to trust that you call us to things that are worth doing. We ask you to inspire more people to show up in burning bushes or in the words of friends and family. We ask you to place a call upon people's hearts, to turn them toward liberation and justice, toward doing things that glorify you in the human community and in the natural world. And we lift up to you places and situations that seem desperate, places where people are struggling with resources, with illness, with addiction or patterns of behavior. We lift up to you places that are torn in conflict. We ask you, God, to send leaders and people of peace into such spaces. We thank you for the work that you are already doing, that you are already at work healing and changing, calling to repentance, forgiving and reconciling, and ask that you make this work known to us. We lift up to you people and situations who are close to us, and those of you who are listening or tuning in, I invite you to share your prayer concerns.
The Sparks family.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Prayers for those who are traveling.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For the many individuals hurt by all the new legislation that is impinging on our personal freedom to make choices for ourselves.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For Camille's aunt and mother and the family as they navigate their care.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Prayers for Mary, Ayana, and Suzuna as they live through the pain of grief and loss.
Lord, hear our prayer.
And prayers for Mary Katundu.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Prayers for Burning Man folks.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For Kathy.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Prayers for the 305 8th Street group home.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For T. Marie King.
Lord, hear our prayer. Prayers for transgender people around the world. Lord, hear our prayer.
Lord, hear our prayer. For all labor actions, that strikes be over soon and all laborers be heard.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For Melanie and her family.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For justice to prevail.
Lord, hear our prayer. Praise that Keisha and JD have closed on their new house.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Lord, hear our prayer.
God, for all those prayers that we've said out loud and the prayers that we carry in our hearts that you hear even before we speak them, we give you thanks that you hear and that you answer. And we also join with Jesus in the prayer that he taught us to pray. Holy One, our Mother and Father, let your name be revered. Let your reign come. Let your will be done on earth as it is in the heavens. Give us today the bread we need for today, and forgive our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial and deliver us from evil. For yours is the sovereignty and the power and the glory now and forever. Amen. So I wanted to focus our attention on this story we heard from Exodus, which is probably a story most of you have heard. It's been, again, I love the depictions in popular culture, whether it's the movie The Ten Commandments or The Prince of Egypt. I like the one The Prince of Egypt, especially because there's the bush that's burning, and yet it's not only not burning, the burning activity is actually bringing life to the bush, which is kind of cool. So, you know, it's kind of the flame of life, right? Before I dive into that, I just want to kind of throw out a question for panelists and people watching, and feel free if you want to share in the comments, or excuse me, if you're in the Zoom chat, feel free to share. Think about a time where you experienced something holy, or where you feel like you came into the presence of God, and what kind of action or how you felt called to respect that or honor that. I'll give you a minute. I'll let you think while I'm talking, but I'll give you a minute of silence just to think about a time you came into a place of holiness and how you responded to it. So this story happens, Moses has been away from Egypt. He's been exiled. He's now a shepherd working for his father-in-law, Jethro. He is out keeping the sheep a long way from the royal life in Egypt or from his Hebrew family. And in this place of exile, which he's in for a good number of years, he probably figured that he was done with the stuff back home. And then God shows up and changes the trajectory of his life. I wonder if, like, before this happened, what was going through Moses' head? Now we can conjecture, right? All this speculative. Maybe he felt like a failure. Maybe he was lonely. Maybe he was just getting used to this new life. Who knows what was happening? But God summons him, gives him an assignment, and tells him to go back to where he came from. It's a pretty powerful story. And it's a story, I think, that bears a lot of different readings. But the part that I want to key in on today, and this is the part that really speaks to me. I know there are different parts that speak to different people. The part that really speaks to me is that Moses asks this question, right? When God gives him his assignment, Moses says, "Who am I that I should go talk to Pharaoh? What are my credentials, right? What authority do I have? What skills do I have to bring to this? I'm a nobody. Who am I that I should go do this?" And God's reply to Moses is not to affirm his credentials. It's not to say, "No, you're qualified because you grew up in Pharaoh's household and you have these connections and you have all this." God doesn't give him the assurance that we would normally give to a person who was expressing doubt, right? Someone's expressing doubt to me, I'm like, "Oh no, you got this. You're a good speaker. You're persuasive. You've got I would try to build the person up, right, to increase their confidence." Moses says, "Who am I that I should go?" And God says, "I will be with you." That's his response. "I will be with you." And Moses, again, has a little consternation, and I think it almost shows that he's a little diplomatic. He says, "Well, if these other people ask me, who is it that sent me, what should I tell them?" This is a very diplomatic way for Moses to say, "And who the hell are you?" Right? Because that's really what he's wondering. "Hi, I'm the God of your ancestors. I want you to go do this thing." And okay, well, who am I that I should do that, first? And second, who are you? Moses doesn't directly ask. He says, "Well, when these people ask me, what should I tell them?" Because he's a little intimidated. I would be too, naturally. And then we have this statement that God makes, which here is translated, I am who I am. Now, again, this story is so rich, and I think it has lasted and endured so long because it actually bears multiple readings. There's so many ways to read this, but I'll tell you, one of my favorites is I kind of zing off into the existential philosophical here, because the name of God is I am, or I am who I am, which sounds very similar to what he just said to Moses. I'll be with you, right? The proper name of God. And this, by the way, this is the proper name of God. It's often referred to in a whisper among Jewish people who take seriously the command not to use God's name in vain. And it kind of highlights the fact that this word that we often use for God is a placeholder. And it almost feels frivolous. It's like if I called you buddy or, human, right? It's like if I didn't refer to you by your proper name, I said, hey, you, or dude, right? That's the word God, that's how that functions. That's not God's name. And I know growing up, I often heard, don't say, oh my God, or God darn it, or whatever, because that would be taking God's name in vain. Well, that's not God's name. That's a placeholder. That's like saying dude. So this is actually God's name. When we were hearing earlier in the Psalm where it says proclaim God's name, right? It wasn't say, that's not God. Hey, everybody, God. No, that's this name, which you don't say in a frivolous way, right? You don't say God's name unless you mean it. This is part of what taking God's name in vain means. So for a long time, just pronouncing this, Yahweh, we think that may be the way it was pronounced. It's 4 Hebrew letters, Yod, He, Vav, He, or Wow, He. So it's Yah-ha-wah-ha. And that's me vocalizing it. But there's some speculation that maybe this is just like the sound of breath, like an inhale and an exhale, right? That this is it's a very strange name. I am who I am. It also makes me think of Richard Rohr talking about, just when we talk about God, what is this being or thing, or what are we talking about when we say God? And Richard Rohr says another name for God is reality. It's just what is. Paul Tillich talked about God as being the ground of being, not a being, but being itself. So just this name can send us into a really philosophical, existentialist kind of place, right? For God's name to be existence, for God's name to be all that is, or for God's name to be breath. It's really evocative. Of what, I'm not sure, but man, is it evocative, right? It just sends you in so many directions. I am who I am. So again, Moses' question, who am I? And God's response, I am. That's such an amazing interaction. It's almost a reciprocal question, though, isn't it? I mean, I think a lot of us, when we're struggling with a sense of our own identity, who am I as a being, experiencing all of this reality? Who am I? And God's response is, I am. And something in us is almost like we're stunned because there's another presence with us here, right? It's not just me, my interiority, and I end at where my skin ends and the universe is out there. It's that God and I, we're both here. Martin Buber famously talked about the ways that we relate to other people and that we relate to God. And a lot of times we move through life treating other people as objects. Martin Buber said a lot of us have kind of I-it relationships. So instead of seeing other people as a thou, we see them as an it, right? And that part of the struggle to be authentically human is for us to have these I thou relationships. I see you as another being, as another place of subjective experience, and I can relate to you in a way that I don't if I just see you as an object. And I think this is a place where God and Moses are seeing each other, right? So Moses comes in and is struggling with these questions of his own identity, his own failure, his own loneliness. And then suddenly there's God saying, the place you are is holy. And so for me, when I think about my own experiences, I'm often struck by how it's when I feel like poo that God appears, right? When I'm struggling with these questions of my own identity or my own existential loneliness or inadequacy or whatever, all my insecurities, suddenly, boom, God shows up and says, hey, you're not the only one here, dude. I am who I am. I am with you. So when I think about my own experiences with the holy, it's often in places like that. Way back when I was 13 in middle school, and I felt probably some of my loneliest at a church camp. It's when I had my aha moment, what I would call my first salvation experience, where I broke down at the altar and a counselor, I don't know who she was, came up behind me, put her arm around me, and we prayed together. And part of the prayer was that I would never be alone, that Jesus would walk with me. And that was a powerful moment of holiness, of being in the presence of something that I think, called out a response. So now that this has happened, what are you going to do? Or in the presence of this, what's the proper response? I think of other times when I've been in the presence of holiness. Just recently, I shared last week when I was in Chicago and having langar with the Sikh community in Chicago. So they feed thousands of people every day during the week. At Golden Temple in India, where they serve tens of thousands of people food every day. And you come in, you put a head covering on, you take off your shoes, because that's what you do to show respect in this place. You sit on the floor and you eat. And I've suddenly realized this is what Jesus meant in the feeding of the 5,000. Like, these people take it seriously. What would it look like if Christians did this? And I had a sense of, I'm in a holy place. This calls out for a response from me, right? I mark this somehow. I take my shoes off. I do something that demonstrates I recognize this is a holy place. Anyway, that's what this story hits for me. Those are the notes it hits for me. I'm wondering for y'all, when y'all encounter something sacred or holy, or when you have encountered that, what kind of response it calls out from you. If that's taking off your shoes or doing some other kind of ritual practice, or what does that look like in your own life?
There are a couple of comments that I thought sounded really lovely.
Okay. Am I heard?
Oh.
Hey, Paula, Miller was going.
If you were talking, you can go ahead. We can come back to the comment.
I've got real bad reception here. I'm going to shut up.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Anyway, Camille commented that Chris feels he is in the presence of God when he works with cancer patients. He responds by absorbing the energy and feels energized. And then she says, I feel God when I'm helping my elders. It can be exhausting, but my soul feels so full and energized, even when it takes its toll on my body.
Thank you for sharing that.
I think I can also relate to feeling it in the presence more of people than of a place or a situation. And I mean, I guess, you meet people in a certain situation, but I don't know, I've felt that sort of awe, that intimidation, that Moses, well, I guess, yeah, that sort of fear that people talk about feeling, but not like in a bad way. You know, more of the awe. You know, when people are willing to sort of say the quiet things out loud, I think is when it gets to me. You know,
kind of a sense of intimacy in that group where people are
not just
sharing.
intimacy, but sort of calling out injustice. You know, I think of certain people. I don't know.
Truth telling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Paula, you got your hand up.
I have got a terrible connection, and can you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you fine.
I'm not even sure what you just said. I'm going to just talk. Okay. For me, it's nearly always been a place. Most recently, Stonehenge. 30 years ago, Joe and I got to go to Ireland, and we visited one of the first monasteries, or the ruins of one of the first monasteries there, Monaster Boys. And when that sense of awe hits me, I just get quiet and still and want to soak it in and breathe it in. And nothing anybody would ever notice. Is just something that's happening in me. And I think that that I am Yahweh's name. I take it in a grammatical sense. I am is present tense, not I was, which is I did something in the past, which God did, but are not I will be. So quit living for the future. And right now, I am. Live with me right this second, right now.
It's a call to present awareness, kind of.
Did Paula freeze?
I think so. So, but yeah, I got the sense of what she's talking about. I think, yeah, she must have a delay or something. There's a little bit of a connection issue. But yeah,
I can comment a little bit on. So Paula's talking about holy places, right? And I know that's an experience that not everyone necessarily has. But something that's, I don't know, kind of interesting to me is I've definitely been in places where, for whatever reason, and I mean, a lot of times this is like out in nature, right? Some really remote place, maybe you've had to work really hard to get there, right? So there's that element of like journey and even kind of ritual going into, like pilgrimage, right? And you get somewhere and you feel how remote you are from other concerns, how different this is from other places. And a lot of times the sort of the response that wells up in me at that point is, well, if I drop dead right now, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
Like there's that my significance diminishes to the point that like it's very accepting, which I think is an interesting experience, and I enjoy that experience.
Yeah.
But I'm also reminded of, even like, it's interesting, what is this idea of holiness, right? I think we can construct, like, well, I'll say this, a lot of times I think we do associate holiness because of the psychological processes involved. It's kind of a constructed aesthetic experience when we talk about holiness in places, right? A lot of times this is facilitated because it is somewhere ancient and you have that connection with thousands of years of history, be it Stonehenge, right? Or what I saw an old video of Seamus Heaney yesterday, like when he was visiting Bow Island, and there's this like little stone statue of a pagan deity from like 1500 years ago or something, and he wrote a poem about it called January God, right? And you think, wow, how amazing would it be to go to this island and walk up to this little pagan idol and just feel the history of all these people in this place, right? So but I had a really interesting experience when Miller and I were in Japan this year. We were on the art island of Naoshima, and there's all these art museums, but it's not like Western art museums where it's like, we have collected all these things, come see them. It's much more curated than that, right? It's like, we have a museum with stuff by 3 artists in 3 rooms, and there's about 5 works here. Come admire them and spend a long time doing it, right? So there was one, I talk about constructed aesthetic experience. There's one, you can find photos of it online, but like, it's this gigantic hall with like outside light coming in from somewhere. I don't remember if it was even direct scale, because the angles were very carefully considered. The architecture was amazing. There's these steps that are ascending into the length of this hall. So it's very sort of Temple of Artemis or something like that. But halfway up the steps, there's sort of a plateau, and then the steps continue on up. But sitting on this sort of plateau is this colossal black stone sphere, perfectly smooth, polished, reflecting light. You walk into this room, and honestly, it's like something, it reminds me of like in that Planet of the Apes movie, like the old one where they discover people worshiping the bomb.
Yeah.
Like, there's just this sense of like, I don't know what this is. I don't know when this was made. Like, you're suddenly yanked out of time. And it's just this experience of like, I just imagined the idea of like 5,000 years from now, when this is all overgrown with vines and everything. What's it like for somebody to find this and find this sphere? I want to see a science fiction movie about just, it's like 2001 and the monolith, right? Like, how did this get here? And it actually, I wrote a haiku about it. I said, 5,000 years, ancient stairs still lead up to a smooth black stone sphere. So I don't know what this idea of a constructed aesthetic experience really is, but I have to associate it with that, the mental transportation of the experience of holiness.
Yeah. Well, it even sounds like part of what you experienced there too was that I like, Melissa Scott, who joins us sometimes, often talks about right sizing, right? It's that you have some experience of like being pulled out of your own time and seeing the span of history and like, I'm this much. And, then there's all this other stuff, right? And there's something about that's, being put in your place, not in a bad way, but in a way it's like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. I have a different understanding now of the universe and my place in it, my tiny little spot.
Yeah.
So
there's that sense of how small you are, but there's also that sense of being part of the whole too, that you're not separated from anymore. You're part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very much so. And I wonder, so Moses is out here in the wilderness and he encounters this burning bush. And, I think, it's just weird enough that there's, and he encounters this presence speaking to him from the burning bush, that it's just weird enough that it's somehow perspective shifting. And he's got a sense of, I'm this tiny little guy, like, Frodo Baggins, and you're asking me to go into, take the ring to Mount Doom, really? And, but there's something about, again, right sizing it. I'm tiny, but I'm part of this bigger thing. Yeah, I get that. Would someone read Camille's comment?
Yeah, I also kind of wanted to comment on like, here, I can read her comment first.
Okay.
Sure. It's she says, I have also felt in holy space and in the presence of God while in shamanistic ritual. Even when in a shared experience, it moves the individual, it charges the soul and feeds spiritual purpose that can be taken and shared with a larger community.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to comment on was I sort of appreciate Moses's skepticism in this situation, because I am the person, I struggle with this whole, like, I am on holy ground thing a little bit because of, oh no. Did I freeze? Am I okay?
No, you're here. You're
Rob
fine.
said I froze. Okay.
He disappeared. I think we're all just having kind of weird.
Sorry, yeah, you at least froze for me and I was worried, so.
Okay.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay. so I was like, I have some difficulty with this whole like being on holy ground thing, because I recall, being in groups of people, doing the whole like changing the light bulb thing, like, and like just like, wait, why are they doing that? What is this? I mean, yeah, they're singing a song, but I think you just like live music. And I mean, I don't mean to, say that they weren't experiencing something, but I have been on the outside of that. So I do also appreciate the fact that even though Moses is like, well, this is really weird, this bush is on fire, and it told me to take my shoes off. He's like, what are you?
Yeah.
And how like thinking about people are not going to believe me when I say this. I mean, even as a guy who presumably has had some power at some point, some recognition, considering he was, raised by the Pharaoh's daughter, and escaped, genocide.
Yeah.
He's yeah.
Right.
Even he is willing to say, I think people are gonna call BS.
Absolutely. Right. And to say, like, I mean, I love the way he puts it. What am I supposed to tell people when they say blank? Right. And it's clear like that's on his mind. And, and actually, I mean, you referenced his past. The last time he went and killed an Egyptian, the question from the Hebrews was like, who do you think you are? Right. And so like there's that, it's so presumptuous of you to come in here like you can just lead us or something. I mean, there's a lot of, and then to say, oh yeah, and by the way, I'm representing the God of your ancestors. Oh yeah, well, who is he then? I mean, I feel like he understands their skepticism because he is skeptical himself, right?
Because I mean, why now?
Yeah,
why
400 years.
Bush? Why didn't you just like, melt Pharaoh's face off when he said he was going to kill a bunch of babies?
Right. It's like you've had 400 years to do something, and now you show up and you expect me to be like, hey guys, I got God, come on, let's do this. Yes, of course people are going to be skeptical. Anyway. Yeah. So Paul, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it's okay if people don't believe you. I've got a grant, honey. Go in there. Go with Joe, Dad.
That's
sorry.
like Real House Church. That's all right. That's Real House Church.
Well, this is Orion.
Hey, Orion.
Say hey. Years ago, when I was in my first pastorate, I had to pick up something at Lifeway Books, which I had ordered, but it was the Baptist bookstore. And it was near Christmas and crowded, and I was standing in line with all these there were 3 lines at the time, and in the line next to me were these 2 young men who were pastors, listening to them talk. It was obvious. And one of the guys makes the statement, I finally figured out what's going on with these men who say God called them to preach. The number one sign of being psychotic is you hear voices talking to you. And I think all of these women are just crazy. And I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to get into it with somebody who obviously wasn't going to change.
Yeah.
But I stepped up to the register to pay, and God took care of it. There was this beautiful young black man who was waiting on me, and at the top of his voice said, "Ma'am, I am so sorry you had to listen to that trash talk. Some people are just crazy."
Oh man. Man.
But no, when God talks to you, a lot of times people won't believe it, but you just go with it anyway. It works out.
That's awesome. What a great story. So Rob, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just listening to Paula's story, I had welling up within me the question, like, well, gee, why isn't it the men who are ever crazy that somebody's calling them to preach, right?
Yeah, I heard God talk to me last night and said, anyway. Yeah.
So there's a comment on Facebook from someone I think a David Barnhart. who talks about feeling holiness when being in nature and observing others in awe of mushrooms, or sharing a video of a snake encounter.
Yeah.
And I did have a thought. There's the whole constructed aesthetic experience angle of right sizing, which sort of, is like, how can I yank you out of time? How can I change your perspective on your place in everything? But then there's also the natural experience, right? Which sort of telescopes in the other direction a lot of times. Which again, it turns into this exercise in right sizing. So I'm really glad you mentioned, that Melissa's language there, because I really like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt. I have a comment I want to read if you're done.
Go ahead. My train of thought derailed.
Oh, it's okay. So this is on YouTube. When I first came out, I noticed how much people used my dead name to try to deny my gender. They wanted to use that name as a way to limit me. Thinking about that, I kept coming back to this story about Moses. Moses wanted a name for God, not to describe him, but to define him. Which God are you? And God dodges the question. An answer is given, but it refuses to define the infinite. The answer is breath or present tense. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, yes, it's a name that doesn't limit, right? As opposed to, Joe Bob, or Jupiter or Zeus or something, it's the name I am really is like, if you say the name, what are you saying? Actually, I am
a comment about yourself.
Yeah.
At the same time that you're talking about God.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like God's name transgresses that whole thing about, oh yeah, you're not divine. Oh, maybe you are. Oh, shucks. There's that kind of surprise situation when you say, I am sent you, or I am sent me. That's a tough name. Okay, Rob, you got your hand up again.
Yeah, it came back to me. But actually, I did want to also, so there's another comment in the chat here saying, there are infinite degrees of experiencing the holy. We describe with the limitation of words, but who can describe infinity? Feelings are evoked, the peace that passes understanding, and it doesn't come close to the ineffable. I love words like ineffable. I think this whole idea about, God as the ground of reality, right, is so important, because, like, when we say things like, well, where can you go to get away from God or God's love, right? Well, I mean, where the sort of the recycling of, the ancient Greek idea about, because the language of in whom we live and move and have our being, that was borrowed from Greek philosophers, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that idea that the divine is the fundament of reality is older, it's not original here, right?
Yeah.
And so when God makes a reassurance like, oh, I'll be with you, there's this reminder. I mean, when you were talking about like wanting to never be alone, right? You can go to the loneliest place, and then you still have one of these right sizing kind of experiences. And it's like, well, yeah, where could you go and not still be part of reality and still be in connection with that, right? So I don't know, it intrigues me to think that when we talk about God, what we're really talking about, well, really, I mean, but part of what we're talking about is the idea that everything that exists and the fact that it exists, the way it exists, in some sense is also, it has perception and it has agency, right? And we unify all that. And when we talk about God and we say, okay, so God, this exists because God wants it to. But, when you start unpacking the idea of what God does, what God's role is existentially, and what it means when you can't escape God's love. It's all tied up with that. The other thought was apropos of what Miller was saying, where it suddenly occurred to me, because I love the whole like turning the light bulbs thing, right? It feels like there is a flavor of spiritual experience that is much more rooted in expectations of credulity. And it's interesting. I love when you highlight that Moses is skeptical. And so I did just want to sort of point out, I think there's an idea of faith out there, and it's not an uncommon one, that equates faith with credulity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably worth talking about how wrong that is.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. Absolutely. Yeah, I think Moses' skepticism is part of what makes this so relatable. I mean, for me, when he says, okay, yeah, this is great and all, but when I go tell them, what am I supposed to tell them? And he is, I think he's asking for himself, like, really? And I think that's part of that experience of the divine. When you actually encounter it, it's like, oh my gosh, really? Can this truly be? One of the things I enjoy when we do nature and forest therapy, we do a meditation called Pleasures of Presence. And you close your eyes and you really tune in to all your senses of, hearing, sound, smelling. I mean, you try to engage all the senses. And this whole time your eyes are closed. And one of my favorite parts, I don't always do this, but frequently in a meditation, whether it's in that context or another, I'll say, all right, so when you open your eyes, try to see everything as though you're seeing it for the first time. Or when you look at the world, try to imagine that what you see sees you back. And it's amazing how often someone will open their eyes and like there'll be a bird right there doing this. Like you open your eyes like, whoa, okay, it's real. And there's a moment where it's like, yes, I mean, not only are you part of nature, but nature sees you, see nature, nature sees you back. There's this reciprocal, hey, I see you there thing going on, which is just pretty stunning when you feel it. Those are holy moments, I think. Yeah. Would someone read Camille's comment?
Sure. Camille says, yesterday I was approached by a homeless man with a blind eye. It came to mind that we are asked to give when asked, so I gave him some cash. But as I walked away, I thought of Odin and the idea that God can materialize in every form to test us and our response to our responsibility to society. God can show up as a burning bush or a damaged person that asks us to get past the skepticism and move into action.
Thank you for that. Yeah. I mean, that's always, so I was talking with Leo on the drive up about creation stories, and the story about we were talking about different ways people have interpreted Genesis, either as being putting human beings at the top of the created order or being the servant of the created order. And one of his things was, his litmus test is whether people can see the first being last and last being first thing. Can you see God as the janitor? And can you see human beings' role as, we're the janitors of creation. We're supposed to be taking care of stuff and cleaning it up. Like that's our role. So if you see it that way, it changes it's topsy-turvy, flips things over. But definitely there's a sense of that's the divine calling, right? So thank you for that. Well, we're rolling up on the end of the hour. Thank you, Aleem. Aleem says, I'm not sure how, but somehow this conversation for me has invoked presence. So thank you for that.
Amen.
Appreciate that. Let's go ahead and pull up the liturgy and wrap things up for us.
Closing prayer is from Catherine of Siena. Eternal Trinity, you are like a deep sea in which the more I seek, the more I find. And the more I find, the more eagerly I seek. You fill the soul, yet never fully satisfied. The soul continues to hunger and thirst for you, desiring you, longing to see you, who are the source of all light. In your light, Eternal Trinity, I have seen into the deep ocean of your love and have rejoiced in the beauty of your creation. You are goodness beyond all goodness, beauty beyond all beauty, wisdom beyond all wisdom. You are the garment that covers all nakedness. You are the food that satisfies all hunger. Amen.
God is love. Nothing is wasted. All things shall be well. Go in peace.
Amen.
Thank you all for such a wonderful discussion. Appreciate your presence. Those of you who, if you're tuning in on Facebook or YouTube, if you don't mind, again, just clicking like or leaving a comment with where you're watching from. That gives us a way to record your presence with us. I'm going to stop the live stream. Those of you on Zoom, if you'll stick around for just a minute more.